Did you know a queen's choice of dress for one day created a billion-dollar industry that still dictates what millions of women wear? What if the life-saving medical procedure we take for granted was only accepted because a queen defied her own doctors to use it? Can you believe that the Christmas traditions in your home started because of a drawing of a royal family in a newspaper? These are not just stories, they are the quiet, often forgotten legacies of women who happened to be born into power. They made choices big and small, and we are still living with the results today. Number 20. How did a queen accidentally create the modern handbag? Princess Grace of Monaco was pregnant in 1956. Paparazzi followed her everywhere. One day, trying to shield her growing belly from the cameras, she held up her leather Hermès handbag, and the photo went global. Before this moment, the Hermès bag, created in the 1930s, was just one of many luxury bags. It was a well-made, but not iconic product. That single photograph changed everything. Suddenly, women everywhere wanted the Kelly bag, as it became unofficially known. Hermès officially renamed it in 1977. Grace Kelly didn't invent the handbag, but she created the idea of the handbag. A single, recognizable, powerful accessory that could define a look and signal status. She turned it from a simple utility item into a statement. The story of the bag itself is practical. It was originally designed for travel. It was called the Sac de Peches. It was meant to hold a saddle. It was sturdy, roomy, and had a clean, functional design. Grace Kelly had used it in the 10955 Alfred Hitchcock film To Catch a Typhon. She loved it and kept it. It was her personal bag. When she held it up to hide her pregnancy, it wasn't a planned marketing move. It was a moment of instinct. But that moment connected a product with a person. The person was a movie star who became a real-life princess. The combination was powerful. This idea of a celebrity-endorsed it bag is now a cornerstone of the fashion industry. Brands pay millions for a celebrity to be seen with their product just once. It all goes back to that candid photo of Grace Kelly. She showed that a simple accessory could become part of a person's identity. It could tell a story. The Kelly bag is still one of the most sought after and expensive handbags in the world. The waiting list can be years long. Each bag is handmade by a single artisan and takes 18 to 24 hours to create. Before this, handbags were functional. They were purses, they carried things. After Grace Kelly, a specific handbag could become an aspiration. It represented a lifestyle. It was about more than just carrying keys and a wallet. It was about carrying a piece of a dream. This shift in perception was her unintended contribution. She didn't design it. She didn't market it. She just used it. And in doing so, she taught the world a new way to think about a simple, everyday object. We still think that way today. Every time a new it bag is declared, every time someone saves up for a specific designer purse, they are following a pattern that was set in that one unscripted moment in 1956. It's a small thing, a handbag, but it's a big business and a powerful idea that a princess accidentally popularized. Number 19. Why did a queen's love for a tiny dog change pet ownership? The Pomeranian dog we know today, a tiny fluff ball weighing under 7 pounds, used to be much bigger. They were working dogs from the Pomerania region of Central Europe, weighing up to 30 pounds. They were used for herding sheep. They were sturdy and practical. That all changed because of Queen Victoria. In 1888, she traveled to Florence, Italy. There she saw a small, red Pomeranian named Marco. She fell in love with him. She brought Marco and several other Pomeranians back to England with her. Victoria's influence was immense. She was a dog lover her whole life, but her passion for these smaller Pomeranians was different. She started a dedicated breeding kennel. She showed her dogs at Crufts, the world's most famous dog show. Her dog Marco won top honors. Because the Queen favored the smaller dogs, breeders began to selectively breed for size. Within her lifetime, the average size of the Pomeranian was reduced by nearly 50%. The tiny companion dog we recognize today is a direct result of her personal preference. Her championing of the breed made them incredibly fashionable. Before Victoria, toy breeds were not as common. A dog was often expected to have a job hunting, herding, guarding. Victoria helped popularize the idea of a dog as a pure companion. A pet whose main purpose was to be a member of the family, a source of affection and comfort. Her dogs lived in the palace with her. They were part of her daily life. When the public saw drawings and read stories of the queen with her little dogs, they wanted one too. She had over 35 Pomeranians during her reign. When she was on her deathbed in 1901, she asked for her favorite Pomeranian, Turi, to be brought to her. The dog was lying on her bed when she passed away. This story, widely reported, further cemented the image of the Pomeranian as the ultimate loyal companion. The Queen's love for a specific type of dog didn't just change the breed. It reinforced a cultural shift in how people viewed pets. The idea of a lap dog, a small animal bred specifically for companionship rather than work, became mainstream. So the next time you see a tiny Pomeranian, remember it's not just a cute dog. It's a living piece of history, shaped and popularized by the most powerful woman in the world. Number 18, can a racecourse be a queen's most enduring legacy? In 1711, Queen Anne was out riding her horse near Windsor Castle. She came across an area of open heathland. She thought it was a perfect place for horses to gallop at full stretch. She decided it would be an ideal location for a racecourse. That patch of land became Ascot Racecourse. Queen Anne founded it. The first race, Her Majesty's Plate, was held on August 11th, 1711. The prize was 100 guineas. Ascot wasn't the first racecourse, but Queen Anne's patronage made it different. She established it as a royal institution. She turned horse racing from a casual pastime for aristocrats into a major social event. The Royal Ascot, the annual summer meeting, became the centerpiece of the British social calendar. It was a place to see and be seen. And fashion became as important as the horses. This was her idea. She wanted it to be an occasion. The tradition she started has continued for over 300 years. Every single British monarch since Queen Anne has been a patron of Ascot. The royal procession, where the monarch arrives in a horse-drawn carriage, was introduced later, in the 1820s, but it builds on the foundation of royal involvement she created. She laid the groundwork for horse racing to become the sport of kings. Her direct involvement was key. She didn't just fund it, she attended. She had her own horses run. Her passion gave the sport a level of prestige it hadn't had before. It made it a national institution. Today, Ascot is one of the most famous racecourses in the world. It attracts over 600,000 visitors a year. The Royal Ascot meeting alone is worth hundreds of millions of pounds to the economy. It's a major global event, broadcast to countries all over the world. And it all started with a queen on a horse who saw a piece of empty land and had an idea. She didn't invent horse racing, but she created a home for it. She gave it a royal seal of approval that has never faded. She popularized the idea of a race meeting as a grand spectacle of sport, society, and fashion. It's a model that has been copied by racecourses globally. Her most visible living legacy might not be a law or a treaty, but a racecourse that still operates under the rules of pageantry she inspired. Number 17, did a queen make it okay to wear a $50 dress? For centuries, royalty meant couture. It meant bespoke gowns made from the most expensive fabrics by the most exclusive designers. The idea was to look untouchable, different from ordinary people. Queen Letizia of Spain changed that. When she was a journalist and news anchor, she wore professional, accessible clothing. When she married into the Spanish royal family in 2004, she didn't completely abandon that. She began to mix high-end designer pieces with affordable, off-the-rack items from Spanish high street brands like Zara, Mango, and Massimo Dutti. This was a radical idea for a modern queen. At first, some fashion critics were dismissive, but the public loved it. They saw a queen wearing a dress they could actually go out and buy themselves, a dress that cost $70, not $7,000. This made her seem relatable. It made the monarchy seem more in touch with the lives of normal people. She repeated outfits. She wore the same dress to multiple events. This was another break from royal tradition, which often dictated a new outfit for every appearance. Her message was clear. You don't need to be wasteful to be stylish. Her influence is called the Letizia effect. When she wears an item from a high street brand, it often sells out within hours. She has provided a global platform for Spanish fashion companies. She has shown that style is not about the price tag, it's about how you put things together. She champions her country's industries in a very direct, visible way. This idea of high-low dressing is now common among younger royals around the world, most notably Catherine, Princess of Wales. But Letizia was a pioneer. She made it a core part of her royal identity. She normalized the idea that a queen could be a fashion icon without being draped in unattainable luxury. She used her clothing choices to send a message of modernity, practicality, and support for her country's economy. It was a quiet revolution. It didn't involve laws or decrees. It involved a dress from Zara, and it changed the unwritten rules of royal dressing forever. Number 16, how did a queen use social media to change the world? In 2007, YouTube was still a new platform. It was mostly for funny videos and music. Queen Rania of Jordan saw something else. She saw a tool to talk to people directly. She launched her own YouTube channel. It was the first of its kind for any royal. Her goal was to challenge stereotypes about Arabs and Muslims. Her first video was simple. She sat at a desk and spoke to the camera. She asked people to send her their questions and stereotypes about her region. She said she wanted to have a real conversation. This was a completely new approach. Traditionally, royalty communicated through press offices and official statements. It was formal and distant. Queen Rania bypassed all of that. She spoke directly to a global audience. She answered people's questions in subsequent videos. She talked about women's rights, education, and daily life in the Middle East. She used humor and plain language. She was breaking down barriers between a royal palace and a teenager's bedroom. After YouTube, she embraced other platforms. She joined Twitter in 2009 and later Facebook and Instagram. She uses them to promote her philanthropic work, especially in education and cross-cultural dialogue. She shares pictures of her official duties, but also family photos and personal moments. This makes her seem human and approachable. She is not just a queen, she is a working mother. She didn't invent social media, but she was one of the first world leaders to understand its power for soft diplomacy. She recognized that a personal connection with millions of people could be more powerful than a formal speech at the UN. She popularized the idea of a royal as a global advocate, using modern tools to reach people. Her work has inspired other leaders and public figures to use social media for social good. She showed that you could use a platform designed for entertainment to have serious conversations. She proved that a monarch in the 21st century could wield influence not just through title and tradition, but through tweets and video uploads. Number 15, what happens when a queen gives her jewelry to a university? Jadwiga of Poland was crowned king, not queen, in 1384. She was just 10 years old. The title king was used to show that she was a monarch in her own right, not just a king's wife. She was known for her piety, intelligence, and charity. One of her greatest contributions was to education. The University of Krakow, founded in 1364, had fallen into decline. It was struggling for money and had largely ceased to function. Jadwiga had a vision to restore it. She wanted it to be a major center of learning for Poland and all of Central Europe. To do this, she needed money, a lot of it. In her last will and testament, she made a remarkable decision. She bequeathed her entire personal fortune, including all her royal jewels, to the university. This was an unprecedented act. Royal jewels were symbols of power and wealth, passed down through generations. To sell them for books and buildings was a radical idea. It put the value of knowledge above the value of royal splendor. She died in 1399 at the age of 25. Her husband, Ladislaw II Jagiello, carried out her wishes. The money from her jewels was used to reestablish and expand the university. It was officially refounded in 1400. It was renamed the Jagiellonian University in the 19th century in honor of the dynasty she founded. Her donation allowed the university to build new buildings and, crucially, to establish a faculty of theology, which Jadwiga had specifically wanted. This put it on par with the great universities of Europe. Her act popularized the idea of major philanthropic support for higher education. She wasn't just a patron, she was a founder. Her personal sacrifice ensured the university's survival and future greatness. The Jagiellonian University is one of the oldest universities in the world still in continuous operation. It has produced famous alumni like Nicolaus Copernicus and Pope John Paul II. It is Jadwig's most lasting legacy. It began with a young queen who believed that a nation's true treasure was not in her crown, but in the minds of its people. Number 14, could a queen's rules for money unify a nation? When Isabella I of Castile came to the throne in 1474, Spain was not a single country. It was a collection of different kingdoms. Each kingdom had its own laws, its own customs, and its own money. The currency was in chaos. Dozens of different coins were in circulation. Their value was unstable. This made trade difficult and confusing. It was hard to build a strong, unified economy. Isabella saw this as a major problem. She and her husband, Ferdinand of Aragon, knew that to build a unified Spain, they needed a single, reliable currency. In 1497, they issued a monetary reform called the Pragmatic of Medina del Campo. This was Isabella's project. The reform established a new system of coins. The main gold coin was the Excelente. The main silver coin was the Real. The value of these coins was fixed. Their weight and purity were strictly controlled. To make sure everyone used the new money, Isabella ordered that all old coins be turned in and melted down. The reform also banned the circulation of foreign currency. This was a massive undertaking. It was the idea of a national, standardized currency as we know it today. Before this, a coin's value could change from one town to the next. After Isabella's reform, a real was a real, whether you were in Castile, Leon, or Granada. This made commerce much simpler and more reliable. It helped to bind the different kingdoms together economically. It was a crucial step in creating the modern state of Spain. The silver real and its successor, the Spanish dollar or piece of eight, became the world's first global currency. Because of Spain's vast empire in the Americas, these coins were used all over the world for centuries. They were legal tender in the United States until 1857. The design of the Spanish dollar, with its two pillars, is even thought to be the origin of the modern dollar sign dollar. Isabella didn't invent money, but she popularized the idea of a state-controlled, standardized, and stable currency. It was an essential tool for nation building. It was an idea that laid the financial groundwork for the Spanish Golden Age and influenced the monetary systems of countries around the globe. Number 13, did a queen's friend invent a meal to stop her getting hungry? Afternoon tea feels like a tradition that has existed forever. It hasn't. It was invented in the 1840s. And it was invented because one woman was hungry. Anna Russell, the Duchess of Bedford, was a lifelong friend and lady in waiting to Queen Victoria. In the 19th century, the evening meal was being served later and later. Sometimes it wasn't until 8 or 9 p.m. There was a long gap between lunch and dinner. The Duchess found she had a sinking feeling in the late afternoon. So she started asking for a tray of tea, bread and butter, and small cakes to be brought to her room privately around 4 p.m. It was a secret little snack to tide her over. She soon started inviting her friends to join her. One of those friends was Queen Victoria. The Queen loved the idea. She began to take afternoon tea herself. Once the Queen adopted the habit, it was no longer a private snack. It became a fashionable social event. Victoria's approval turned the Duchess's personal habit into a national institution. Instead of being a private affair in a bedroom, it moved into the drawing room. It became more elaborate. Small sandwiches, scones, and pastries were added. It became an occasion with its own etiquette and its own special equipment, like tea sets and cake stands. The tea gown was even invented for women to wear at these less formal, at-home gatherings. The idea spread quickly through the upper and middle classes. It was a perfect way to entertain guests. It filled a social void in the day. By the late 19th century, afternoon tea was an established part of British life. Tea rooms and tea gardens opened up in cities to cater to the demand. It became a quintessentially British custom exported around the world. We still have afternoon tea today. It's a special treat, a celebration, a tourist attraction. It's a multi-million pound industry. And it all started because the Queen's friend couldn't wait for dinner. Queen Victoria didn't invent it. But by embracing it and making it part of her court's routine, she popularized it. She gave it the royal stamp of approval that transformed a simple snack into an enduring cultural tradition. Number 12. How did a queen turn her garden into a public park? In the 1720s, most royal gardens were private. They were for the enjoyment of the monarch and the court. They were formal, with straight lines and geometric patterns, designed to show human control over nature. And Queen Caroline, the wife of King George II of Great Britain, had different ideas. She was intelligent, curious, and a great patron of the arts and sciences. She was also passionate about gardens. She didn't like the stiff, formal style. She preferred a more natural look. She took over the management of several royal parks, including Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens in London. She hired progressive landscape architects like Charles Bridgman. Together, they began to transform the royal landscape. They broke up the formal avenues. They created winding paths. They dug a large serpentine lake, the Serpentine, by damming a small river. This was a radical departure from the straight canals of French-style gardens. It was the beginning of the English landscape garden style, which aimed to create an idealized version of nature. But her most revolutionary idea was about access. She believed the public should be able to enjoy these beautiful spaces. She opened Kensington Gardens to the public on Saturdays. There was a condition: you had to be respectably dressed. This was a small step, but it was the start of a major shift. It was the beginning of the idea of the public park. A beautiful designed green space in a city that was open for everyone to enjoy. Her work had a huge influence. The English landscape style she championed became popular all over Europe. More importantly, her decision to allow public access to royal land set a precedent. Over the next century, more and more royal parks and private estates were open to the public. The idea that green space was a public good, essential for the health and happiness of city dwellers, grew from the seeds she planted. Today, public parks are a vital part of every city. They are places for recreation, relaxation, and community. We take them for granted, but the concept owes a great deal to a queen who decided her garden was too beautiful to keep to herself. Number 11 was the first great scientific expedition led by a woman. Around 1493 BC, a woman ruled Egypt as pharaoh. Her name was Hatshepsut. She was one of the most powerful and successful pharaohs in Egyptian history. For a long time, historians tried to erase her. Her name was chiseled off monuments, but her story survived. One of her greatest achievements was not a war, but a massive trade expedition. It was one of the first large-scale, state-sponsored scientific and economic expeditions in history. Hatshepsut organized a fleet of 5 massive ships to sail down the Red Sea to a mysterious and faraway land called Punt. The exact location of Punt is still debated by historians, but it was likely somewhere in modern-day Eritrea or Somalia. The goal of the mission was not conquest, it was trade and discovery. She wanted to bring back the treasures of Punt, especially incense trees like myrrh and frankincense. These were essential for Egyptian religious rituals. The expedition was a huge success. The ships returned laden with goods. They brought back gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic animals like apes and giraffes, but most importantly, they brought back live myrrh trees. This was the first recorded attempt in history to transplant foreign trees. Hatshepsut had the 31 trees planted in special gardens at her magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. She was creating a botanical garden, a collection of foreign plants for study and use. She documented the entire expedition in detail. The walls of her temple are covered in carved reliefs and hieroglyphs that tell the story. They show the ships, the voyage, the people of Punt, and the goods they brought back. It is a historical and scientific record of immense value. Hatshepsut's expedition was more than just a shopping trip. It was an act of organized botanical exploration. She wasn't just importing a product, she was importing the source of the product. She popularized the idea of a state-funded mission to explore, document, and bring back knowledge and resources from the wider world. It was a model for scientific exploration that would be repeated by cultures for thousands of years to come. Number 10, did a queen write the first books on makeup? Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, is famous for her political ambition and her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But she was also a scholar. She was the only member of her dynasty to learn to speak the Egyptian language. She was well educated in mathematics, philosophy, and astronomy, and she was an expert in what we would now call pharmacology and cosmetology. As ancient sources like the Roman physician Galen mentioned that Cleopatra wrote several books. The subjects were cosmetics, perfumes, and remedies for hair loss and skin problems. Sadly, these books are lost, but they were referenced by other writers for centuries after her death. They were considered serious works of practical science. This tells us she wasn't just a consumer of beauty products, she was a creator and an expert. Her most famous look was her dramatic eye makeup. She used kohl, a black powder made from ground galena, a lead ore, to create her thick winged eyeliner. She also used green eyeshadow made from powdered malachite. This wasn't just for beauty. The Egyptians believed that the lead-based makeup had magical healing properties. They thought it protected their eyes from the sun's glare and from eye infections carried by flies. Modern science has suggested there might be some truth to this. Low levels of lead salts can stimulate the immune system to fight off bacterial infections. Cleopatra took this existing practice and elevated it. She experimented with ingredients. She created complex perfumes and skin creams. Her court was a center for this kind of knowledge. She popularized the idea of cosmetics as both an art and a science. She understood the chemistry of her materials. Her influence was so great that the Roman women started to copy her style. Even after her death, she was remembered not just as a queen, but as an authority on beauty and medicine. Today, the global cosmetics industry is worth billions of dollars. It is built on the same principles that Cleopatra practiced, the scientific formulation of products to enhance appearance and treat the skin. Her lost books were some of the earliest texts on this subject, written by a queen who was also a scientist. Number 9, why did a queen get blamed for introducing the fork? The fork seems like a basic tool. It's hard to imagine eating without one, but for most of Western history, people ate with their hands and a knife. The fork was seen as strange, foreign, and even sinful. Its introduction to Europe is a long story with many players, but one of the key figures credited with popularizing it and getting criticized for it was a Byzantine princess named Theodora Dukaina. In the 11th century, she traveled from Constantinople to marry Domenico Selvo, the Doge of Venice. The Byzantine Empire was far more sophisticated than Venice at the time. Theodora brought with her many refined customs from her home court. One of them was a small, two-pronged golden fork. She used it to eat. The Venetians were shocked. They saw it as an outrageous luxury and an affront to God. They believed God had given people fingers to eat with, and using an artificial instrument was an insult. One prominent churchman, Peter Damian, wrote scathingly about her. He called her use of the fork a sign of decadent vanity. When Theodora died a few years later from a terrible plague, he claimed it was divine punishment for her luxurious and unnatural habits, especially her use of the fork. This story was told and retold for centuries. It associated the fork with sin, vanity, and foreign excess. Despite the backlash, the idea slowly caught on, especially in Italy, where pasta became more common. It was easier to eat long strands of pasta with a fork, but it took a very long time. Catherine de' Medici is often credited with bringing the fork to France in the 16th century, but it was still considered an affectation. It wasn't until the 18th century that the fork became common across Europe. Theodora didn't invent the fork. It had been used in the ancient world, but her story is important. She represents the clash of cultures that often happens when a new idea is introduced. She tried to popularize a more hygienic and refined way of eating. She was met with suspicion and scorn. The story of her being punished by God for using a fork became a cautionary tale that actually slowed its adoption. But in the long run, the idea was too practical to ignore. She was a pioneer, centuries ahead of her time, who was vilified for an invention we now can't live without. Number 8, how did a queen help launch Mozart's career? In 1764, an 8-year-old boy named Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart arrived in London with his family. He was a child prodigy, a brilliant musician and composer. But he was not yet famous. His father, Leopold, was trying to make a name for his son by touring the courts of Europe. In London, they secured an audience with King George III and his wife, Queen Charlotte. Queen Charlotte was a passionate music lover and a talented musician herself. She played the harpsichord, she sang, she took a special interest in the young Mozart. She wasn't just a passive listener. She tested him. She put complex pieces by composers like Bach and Handel in front of him, and he played them perfectly on sight. She sang an aria, and he improvised a beautiful accompaniment on the spot. She was deeply impressed. This royal approval was crucial. Queen Charlotte became his most important patron in England. She and the king paid the Mozarts handsomely for their performances. But she did more than that. She championed him. She talked about him at court. Her enthusiasm helped create a buzz around the young genius. Because of the Queen's support, Mozart became the talk of London society. His concerts were sold out. During his time in London, Mozart composed his first symphonies. He later dedicated a set of 6 sonatas to Queen Charlotte. This was a public declaration of his gratitude. The dedication was printed and sold, further linking his name with the Queen's. Her patronage gave him credibility and visibility at a critical stage in his career. It helped establish his international reputation. Queen Charlotte's contribution was not just about money, it was about her genuine expertise and her passion. She recognized his genius when he was still a child. She used her position to help him. She popularized the idea of the monarch as not just a consumer of art, but as an active, knowledgeable patron who could identify and nurture great talent. Her support for Mozart helped shape the course of classical music. It was an investment in a young boy that paid off for the whole world. Number 7, who is the Queen that championed pain relief in childbirth? For most of history, childbirth was expected to be painful. Many people believed it was a woman's religious duty to suffer. This idea was based on the biblical story of Adam and Eve. In the mid-19th century, a new medical discovery promised to change that anesthesia. Scientists like James Young Simpson in Scotland began using chloroform to relieve the pain of labor. The reaction was fierce. There were medical objections. Doctors worried about the safety of the drug for the mother and child, and there were strong moral and religious objections. The clergy preached that to remove the pain of childbirth was to go against God's will. The debate raged for years. Anesthesia in childbirth remained a controversial and rare procedure that changed on April 7, 1853. On that day, Queen Victoria was giving birth to her 8th child, Prince Leopold. She had had 7 difficult births before. This time, she decided she wanted pain relief. Her doctors were hesitant, but the Queen insisted. She asked for Dr. John Snow, a pioneer in anesthesiology, to administer chloroform to her during the final stages of labor. The procedure was a success. The Queen was delighted. She described the chloroform as soothing, quieting, and delightful beyond measure. Her decision was momentous. She was the most famous woman in the world. She was the head of the Church of England. If she used anesthesia, how could it be against God's will? Her choice silenced most of the religious opposition overnight. It also gave the practice a huge stamp of medical respectability. If it was safe enough for the Queen, it was safe enough for everyone. After Queen Victoria used it, the practice became known as anesthésie à la reine, anesthesia in the Queen style. Her demand from women of all social classes soared. It became much more common and accepted. Queen Victoria didn't invent chloroform. Dr. John Snow and Dr. James Young Simpson did the scientific work. But the Queen did something just as important. She popularized it. She used her unique position to overcome years of prejudice and fear. She made a personal medical choice that had a profound public impact. Her decision helped millions of women have a safer and less painful experience of childbirth. Number 6, why did a queen build a museum to hide her art? Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia, was an obsessive art collector. She said she was not a lover of art, but a glutton. She bought entire art collections from financially troubled aristocrats across Europe. In 1764, she acquired a collection of 225 paintings from a Berlin merchant. She needed somewhere to put them. She didn't want to display them in the main rooms of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. She wanted a private place where she could go to be alone with her art. She had a small pavilion built next to the palace. She called it her hermitage, from the French word hermitage, meaning a place of solitude or a hermit's dwelling. This was her private retreat. Only she and a few chosen friends were allowed to enter. Inside, she would look at her paintings, read, and have quiet conversations. It was her personal escape. But her gluttony for art continued. She kept buying more and more. The Hermitage had to be expanded again and again. She added a second building, the large Hermitage, and then a theater. By the end of her reign, her collection included nearly 4,000 paintings, thousands of drawings, and vast collections of sculptures, coins, and gems. It was one of the greatest art collections in the world, but it was still largely private. It was for her eyes only. The idea of the museum, as we know it today, a public institution for the education and enjoyment of everyone, was still very new. Catherine's Hermitage was not that. It was a private royal collection. However, the sheer scale and quality of what she assembled created the foundation for one of the world's greatest public museums. After her death, the collection continued to grow. In 1852, her grandson, Tsar Nicholas I, finally opened the Hermitage to the public. He realized that a collection of this importance belonged to the nation. Catherine didn't intend to create a public museum. She was creating a private sanctuary, but in doing so, she amassed a collection so vast and so important that it inevitably had to become public. She popularized the idea of a monarch as a monumental art collector, a consolidator of national treasure. The State Hermitage Museum today occupies the entire Winter Palace complex. It has over 3 million items. It is a legacy of a queen's private passion that became a gift to the world. Number 5, how did a simple pizza get named after a queen? In 1889, King Umberto I and Queen Margherita of Italy were visiting Naples. At the time, Italy was still a very young, newly unified country. The royal family was trying to build a sense of national identity and win the support of the people in the South. The queen had heard about a local peasant dish called pizza. She was curious and wanted to try it. This was unusual. Royalty typically ate French cuisine. Local food was considered coarse and common. A famous Naples pizza maker named Raffaele Esposito was summoned to the royal palace. He was asked to prepare some pizzas for the queen. He made 3 different kinds. The first had lard, cheese, and basil. The second had a type of small fish. The third was something new he created just for the occasion. He wanted to make a pizza that was patriotic. He topped it with tomatoes red, mozzarella, cheese white, and fresh basil green. These were the colors of the new Italian flag. The queen loved all the pizzas, but the third one was her favorite. Esposito was overjoyed. He asked if he could name his creation after her. She agreed. From that day on, that combination of toppings was known as Pizza Margherita. This was a brilliant moment of public relations. The story spread all over Italy. The queen, a symbol of the new nation, had embraced a humble dish from Naples. It sent a message of unity. It helped elevate pizza from a local street food to a national dish. Before this, pizza was seen as food for the poor. After Queen Margherita's endorsement, it became respectable. Restaurants started putting it on their menus. Italian immigrants later took the pizza margherita with them to America and around the world. It is now arguably the most famous and popular type of pizza on the planet. Its simplicity and its connection to the colors of the Italian flag have made it an icon. We still eat it today, over 130 years later. It's a global food phenomenon that started with a queen's curiosity and a pizza maker's patriotism. Number 4, did a German tradition become global because of a magazine? The Christmas tree tradition is German. For centuries, German families had brought evergreen trees into their homes during the winter and decorated them. In Great Britain, it was a rare and obscure custom. Queen Charlotte, who was German, had set up a Christmas tree at a party for children in 1800. But the idea didn't really catch on with the wider public. It remained a curiosity of the royal court. That all changed with another German royal, Prince Albert, and his wife, Queen Victoria. Victoria and Albert loved Christmas. They made it a huge celebration for their growing family. They continued the German tradition of setting up a decorated Christmas tree at Windsor Castle. For several years, this was a private family affair. Then, in 1848, a drawing of the royal family appeared in a popular magazine, the Illustrated London News. It showed Queen Victoria, Prince Albert, and their children gathered around a beautifully decorated Christmas tree topped with an angel. This one image changed everything. The Illustrated London News was read by middle-class families all over Britain. They saw the royal family, who they admired and wanted to emulate, enjoying this charming new tradition. They wanted to do it too. Suddenly, everyone had to have a Christmas tree. Nurseries started selling fir trees. Shops started selling ornaments, candles, and sweets to decorate them. The Christmas tree became a commercial product and a central part of the British Christmas celebration. When the image was published in America 2 years later in Godey's Lady's Book, it had a similar effect. The magazine edited the drawing slightly, removing the Queen's crown and Prince Albert's mustache to make them look more American. The idea exploded. The Christmas tree went from being a niche German custom to a mainstream tradition in Britain and America within just a few years. Victoria and Albert didn't invent the Christmas tree, but their social influence was so powerful that they were able to popularize it on a massive scale. That 1848 drawing was like a viral post before the internet. It took a private family tradition and broadcast it to the world. The way many of us celebrate Christmas today, with a decorated tree at the center of our homes, is a direct result of that one picture of a queen and her family. Number 3, could a queen's fear save millions of lives? In the early 18th century, smallpox was one of the most feared diseases in the world. It was highly contagious and often fatal. If you survived, you were usually left with deep scars. There was no cure. But there was a folk practice in parts of Asia and Africa that seemed to offer some protection. It was called variolation. It involved taking a small amount of pus from a fresh smallpox sore and introducing it into a small cut on a healthy person's skin. This would usually cause a mild case of the disease, and the person would then be immune for life. It was risky. Some people died from the procedure, but it was far less risky than catching smallpox naturally. The idea was brought to England by Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, the wife of the British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire. She had seen it done in Constantinople and had her own son variolated. When she returned to London, she tried to promote the practice. The medical establishment was deeply skeptical. The public was terrified. The idea of deliberately giving someone a disease sounded insane. The idea might have died there, if not for a royal. Caroline of Ansbach, the Princess of Wales at the time, was a very intelligent and scientifically minded woman. She heard about variolation from Lady Mary. She was also a mother who was terrified of smallpox. She wanted to protect her children, but she was cautious. She didn't want to risk her own children's lives on an unproven procedure. So she persuaded her father-in-law, King George I, to allow an experiment. The experiment was grim by modern standards. The procedure was first tested on 6 prisoners at Newgate Prison, who were scheduled to be executed. They were offered a full pardon if they survived. They all survived. Then it was tested on a group of abandoned orphan children. They also all survived. Convinced by these results, Caroline finally had her own 2 daughters, Amelia and Caroline, variolated in 1722. This was a huge public event. A princess had used this controversial new medical procedure on her own children. Her act of courage and trust in science made variolation fashionable and acceptable. It became a common practice among the upper classes. It saved thousands of lives. Variolation was the precursor to vaccination, which was developed by Edward Jenner later in the century using the safer cowpox virus. But it was the first step towards the idea of inoculation, and it was a step that was only taken because a princess was willing to champion a scary new idea to save her children. A Russian empress, Catherine the Great, did a similar thing a few decades later, having herself and her son variolated to convince her own skeptical public, further popularizing the practice across Europe. Number 2, why did a queen wear white to her wedding? Before 1840, there was no traditional color for a bride's wedding dress. A woman simply wore her best dress. It could be any color. In fact, red was a very popular choice. Blue was also common as it was associated with purity. White was a color for the rich because it was hard to keep clean, but it was also a color of mourning in some cultures. There was no expectation that a bride should wear white. The idea that a white wedding dress is a timeless symbol of purity is a modern invention. And it was invented by Queen Victoria. On February 10th, 1840, Queen Victoria married her cousin, Prince Albert. She was 20 years old. She was the queen of the most powerful empire on earth. Everyone was watching to see what she would wear. She made a surprising choice. She decided against, the heavy jewel-encrusted robes of state. She chose a simple, elegant white satin gown. It was trimmed with orange blossoms and handmade lace. She wore a wreath of orange blossoms in her hair instead of a crown. Her choice was very personal. She wanted to appear not as a monarch, but as a woman in love, making a commitment to her husband. The white color was not meant to symbolize purity. It was chosen because it was the perfect color to show off the exquisite detail of the Honiton lace, which she had specially commissioned to support the struggling English lace industry. Her dress was a statement of love, but also a piece of economic policy. When paintings and drawings of the royal wedding were published, the public was captivated. Every young woman wanted to look like the queen on her wedding day. The white wedding dress became the new standard. It was a romantic, fashionable ideal. Magazines and etiquette books began to promote white as the only proper color for a bride. They retroactively assigned the meaning of purity and innocence to the color. The trend grew throughout the 19th century and became firmly established in the 20th. Today, the white wedding dress is the centerpiece of a global wedding industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Millions of women spend thousands of dollars on a dress they will wear only once. It's a tradition that feels ancient and deeply meaningful. But it's not. It's a fashion trend that was started by one young queen on one day in 1840. Her personal choice became a universal custom. Number 1. Can the way a queen rules become a blueprint for power? When Elizabeth I became Queen of England in 1558, her position was weak. England was a divided country. She was a woman in a world of powerful kings. Many people believed a woman was unfit to rule. Her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, had a strong claim to her throne. Elizabeth had no husband, no heir. She was expected to fail. She didn't. She ruled for 44 years, and her reign is remembered as a golden age. She did this by popularizing a new idea of what a monarch could be. Elizabeth understood the power of image. She was one of the first rulers to consciously create a public persona. This was her great invention. She used portraits, fashion, and public appearances to project an image of power, stability, and divine authority. She became a brand. Her portraits were carefully controlled. In them, she is covered in pearls to signify purity. She wears enormous, elaborate dresses that make her look larger than life, almost superhuman. Her ruffs got bigger, her jewels more numerous. She wasn't just a queen. She was Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, married to her kingdom. This Virgin Queen image was a stroke of political genius. By refusing to marry, she kept her power for herself. She didn't have to share it with a husband or be drawn into foreign conflicts through a marriage alliance. Instead, she used the possibility of her marriage as a diplomatic tool for decades, playing one suitor against another. She turned what was seen as her greatest weakness, being an unmarried woman, into her greatest strength. She was presented as a semi-divine figure, a Protestant virgin who had saved England. She also perfected the art of the royal progress. Each summer, she would travel through the country with her court. This allowed her subjects to see her. It was a massive public relations exercise. It built a personal bond between the queen and her people. They saw her, they cheered for her, and they felt she was their queen. Her speeches, like the famous one to her troops at Tilbury before the Spanish Armada, were masterpieces of rhetoric designed to inspire loyalty and courage. Elizabeth's great idea was to rule through a combination of shrewd politics and masterful propaganda. She showed that a monarch's power came not just from their birthright, but from the love and support of their people. And That love could be manufactured and managed. She created a cult of personality around herself, this model of a ruler who actively manages their public image, who uses ceremony and symbolism to strengthen their hold on power, has been a blueprint for leaders ever since. She didn't invent monarchy, but she invented a new and incredibly successful way to do it.